اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين وضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيه من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله وطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد عذل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع مشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي ينشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for all the Muslims.
خوشنودی امام زمانه با آواز بلند صلوات. اللهم صل علی محمد و آل محمد. شهرا جهان میں حسن عسکری کا ہے نقش ننگی وہ عرش کی انگشتری کا ہے کونین میں گل چمن صفدری کا ہے در یتیم وعدن پیغمبری کا ہے مظلومیت میں مل سے جناب حسین ہے اور دبدبے فاتح خیبر حنین ہو ہم نام یہ حسن کا یہ محبوب زدی بابا علی نہ کی ہے تو جد مرتضی علی خود قبلہ زمین و زمان بیدا سخی سرتاج خاک زیب دہے مسند نبی ابن نکیل کب ہے شہ خاص و عام کا اور صاحب و زما ہے پسر اس امام کا عابد کی طرح ان پہ عبادت کا خاتمہ مثل حسن خلق مروت کا خاتمہ مثل علی ہے ان پہ شجاعت کا خاتمہ صدیقی طرح شہ پہ صداقت کا خاتمہ شمع مزار اقدس شیر الہ ہے پشت و پناہ قبر رسالت پناہ ہے کیا معتدن کہر کیا وا مصیبتا ویسے ولی کو زہر دیا وا مصیبتا اما کے درگر کو لوٹ لیا وا مصیبتا خون جگر رم نے پیا وا مصیبتا فارا کفن نبی نے علی ننگ سر ہوئے بچپن پہ ہائے مہدی دین پدر ہوئے مولا کو ورثہ حسن مجتبی ملا دستے ستم سے ان کو بھی زہر دغا ملا ہر روز ایک روز سے صدمہ سوا ملا کیا خاک میں نشان رسول خدا ملا زہر اجل سے سبز حسن کا بدن ہوا سبز خوب شیر خدا کا چمن ہوا اب اس طرح سے اہل خبر کرتے ہیں بیان ماتم سرا میں بی بیا کرتی تھی سب فغا نہلا چکے جو لاشے مولا دو جہاں کفنائے ان کو رکھتے محتحر کے درمیان آواز آئی فاطمہ کے شور و شین کی سب شیعہ روئے بے کفنی پر حسین کی اب میں کہاں صفے ماتم بپا کروں کس قسم میں बकिए में बरपाजा करूं या करबला में सोग की है बिना करूं या तुझसे रिजा की लहद पर बुका करूं रोई न जा मैं रोज़े शहे मशरक़ैन में सर पीटू सा मुराबे वाया काज़मीन में أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات ثواب الفاتحة على الخصوص أغم هدي شوشتري عبد السن جعفر أكبر لي راج محمد جعفر بوغا الفاتحة
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين أما بعد فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجعلنا منهم أئمة يهدون بأمرنا لما صبروا وكانوا بآياتنا يوقنون صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Imam Al-Hassan ibn Ali al-Askari, martyred at the age of 28 years old, and the duration of his imamat was for a period of 6 years. You find that Imam Hassan al-Askari lived in one of the most crucial junctures of Islamic history. For after Imam al-Askari's martyrdom, you find the potential to directly meet and interact with the Imam was going to be changed, for now we were beginning to enter a new era, and that era was called Al-Ghaiba, or the occultation, and this occultation was divided into two. You find that you had the minor occultation, Al-Ghaibatu Sughra, from the year 260 to the year 329 after the migration of the Prophet. And from the year 329, we had the beginning of Al-Ghaibatul Kubra, or the major occultation. You see, the death of Imam Hassan al-Askari, his martyrdom, it ushered in a new era. And as I said, this was that era where the accessibility to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt from an open perspective was now cut off. Though even the Imams before the 12th Imam, you find access to them was limited. So in this manner, Imam Hassan al-Askari played an important role for the preparation of the Shia to enter that time called Al-Ghaiba. And indeed tonight, the subject which I want to analyze is examining the preparation of Imam Hassan al-Askari for that time period known as Al-Ghaibatu Sughra, or the minor occultation. You can imagine that Al-Ghaibatu Sughra, that after a period of a 250 or more years, when the followers of Ahlul Bayt had direct access to their Imam, now began a period where this access to the Imam was not there. You can imagine the confusion. You can imagine the differences that must have arose. Indeed, this period of Al-Ghaibatu Sughra was such a dark period within history. You find that the historians titled this period by the name of Al-Aheda, or the confusion. And it is stated within this period of the minor occultation, the number of the Shia dramatically went down. And Sheikh al-Mufid, he records that there were 15 different denominations which arose, and each of them had their own view on the Imam of that time. You see, when we examine the history of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, we say that it is the seerah of this Imam. The word seerah in Arabic, which is used for history, it comes from the word sayr. The word sayr means to travel. When we study the lives of each of these a'imma, it is not simply a dry historical exercise, but we are seeking to understand their time period and to see which actions did that imam carry out in his time period, which can be applied into our lives today. That's why when you look at one of the great urafa and mystics in Najaf by the name of Sayyid Qadi Tabatabai, many people, they would come to Sayyid Qadi Tabatabai for spiritual advice, and Sayyid Qadi would often give very practical spiritual advice. On one such occasion, you find a group of individuals, they came to Sayyid al-Qadi, they said to Sayyid al-Qadi that give us some spiritual advice. He said, study the lives of the infallibles from the birth of the Prophet to the martyrdom of Imam Hassan al-Askari. Because if you understood this time period, you find the teachings which are found within this area, within this period of 250 years, were teachings which were a light of guidance for the next centuries which would come. And in this manner, you find that understanding that first period of occultation known as Ghaibatu Sughra has a profound impact upon us in understanding our time today, the major occultation. Now, before I come to the crux of the discussion, and I come towards the crux of the analysis, there needs to be a question that within that early time period, how do we know what occurred historically? That were there different individuals who wrote books about that time period? Were there different individuals who narrated about that time period? And you find the sources of this discussion for that early time period are really divided into three categories of sources. You find the first group of sources which speak about the minor occultation, or al-Ghaibatu Sughra, are the works which were written about the Ghaiba. You see within Imami scholarly history, and Imami means Shia, you find there were a number of scholars who wrote works about the Ghaiba. These works, some of them were written before the beginning of the minor occultation, before the year 260. Some of them were written between the year 260 to 329, which was the period of the minor occultation. And some of them were written after the year 329. So what this goes to show, particularly the works which were before the beginning of the occultation, it goes to show that the idea of a 12th Imam coming and being an occultation was something which is known. And this is a very important point. Some people, they may come forth and they may say that you as Shia, is it not possible that this is just a revisionist history, that you are looking back into history and you're saying this is what occurred? We reply by no. When you look within history, there were works even before the occultation speaking about the beginning of the occultation. For example, in the time period of the A'imma, there were 400 books. And these books, really, they aren't even books. They were short treatises, which were called the Al-Usul al-Arba'miya, the 400 fundamental sources. And these sources were the basis for later books which would be written. So when you look at a book like Al-Kafi, for example, and you look at different hadith book, You find that there is a living tradition, oftentimes connecting these books to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And I know this discussion of sources may be a bit dry, so I'm trying to speak very quickly so we can get to the crux of the discussion. But sometimes it is necessary for us to understand the scholarly process behind understanding history. So you find these works of ghaiba, some of them were written earlier. Some of them were written even after the occultation. For example, you find Sheikh al-Mufid had a work on the ghaiba. You find that there was a scholar by the name of An-Nu'mani who had a work on the ghaiba. You find Sheikh al-Saduq had a book, Kamaluddin, and in this manner, this was the first category. The second category of works which discuss the ghaiba were biographical literature about the narrators of a hadith, because one who narrates from the Imams, people would check the biography and see if that person was honest or not. And number three, we have the standard works of history which speak about this time period. So very quickly, and I went fast on purpose, you find that these were the sources which discuss this time period known as Al-Ghaibatu Sughra. But now an important question comes up, is that in this time of ghaiba, major occultation that you and I live in, is this the first time that there has been no direct access to the divine guide? Or did we see within the lives of Ahlul Bayt a gradual blockade on access to them and a system developing underground to which Ahlul Bayt would carry out their activities? You see, from the very onset, from the time period of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam to the time period of Imam Hassan al-Askari, we see a gradual escalation that the Abbasid government of that time, because of the circulation of the hadith, that there will be an individual by the name of Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif who will uprise. You find the Abbasids, they adopted different policies to keep a close eye on the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. In the time period of Imam Sadiq, you find before the Abbasid revolution, the Abbasid leaders, they would speak to Imam Sadiq about gaining his support. Imam Sadiq would reject. And you know what Imam Sadiq started? He started an underground organization that would collect khums for him, that would work at a covert and not an open level. You see, oftentimes, we think that the only way to serve the mission of Ahlul Bayt is if we are out and upfront. But no, there have always been individuals in history. These people, they would work underground and they would lay the foundation of what is to come within the future and what is to come to support the mission of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And you know, this is very practical in our society today, because to be very frank and to be very candid, those opportunities to work at a public level, they may be limited. Yes, one can make an effort, but there is limitations because of the principles that we hold on to. You find that one may not be able to go at that level, but there is always the opportunity that one lays the groundwork. So you find in the time period of Imam Sadiq, we see an underground system developing. In the time period of Imam Musa al-Kadhim, you find that system, it develops further. In Imam Musa al-Kadhim's time, you find that this group of individuals who would work underground to establish the mission of the Imam, to collect the khums on behalf of the Imam, to spread the traditions of the Imams, you find that they would gain more area. For example, there was a hub of the followers of Ahlul Bayt in Egypt, which the Imam would communicate with. And you know, even one of the signs that's stated of the return of the Imam is that there will be an increase in tashayyo and underground movement in Misr even before the return of the 12th Imam. And many of these signs we are seeing today. So you find that these are these discussions, and this is the works which the Imams would carry out. And you find Imam al-Rida's time. Imam al-Rida was made the heir apparent because the Abbasids now adopted a policy that they wanted to keep the Imams closer towards them, that they wanted to keep an eye on them. And eventually you find Imam al-Jawad starts developing this underground system more. And we reach the time period of Imam Ali al-Hadi and Imam Hassan al-Askari. You see, Imam Hassan al-Askari, alayhi salam, within his time period, as I mentioned, there was a gradual increase in the blockade of access from the Shia to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because the Abbasids knew now we are approaching the 12th of Ali Muhammad. Now we are approaching a time period that the hadith which are circulated and well known, they say that there will be one who will uprise. So one policy that the Abbasids they carried out of Imam Hassan al-Askari is that they made Imam Hassan al-Askari come towards Samara. And of course, Samara in Arabic meant surra man ra'a, that this place is beautiful to anyone who looks at it because of the beauty of the place. And you find that Imam Hassan al-Askari, virtually he spends a large portion of his life in house arrest. Imam Hassan al-Askari, as I said, that this period of the imamat of Imam Hassan al-Askari was vitally important, because the job of Imam Hassan al-Askari is to ensure the guidance of the followers of Ahlul Bayt in some of the darkest times in history which was to come. And we find there were many theological discussions and there were many forms of doubts which were coming in, which Imam Hassan al-Askari, he would dispel. For example, in the time of Imam Hassan al-Askari, there was an individual who wrote a book called At-Tanaqud fil Quran, the contradictions within the Quran. You see, this man said that when you look at the Quran, the spirit of the book of God, there is contradiction within this book. One verse says something, another verse says something else. Imam Hassan al-Askari, he says to one of his students that go to this man. And when you go towards this man, ask him one question. Ask him the question that is it possible that what you have understood from the book is different from the one who sent it intended? Now, I'll repeat my line. Is it possible that what you understood is different than what the writer of the book intended? You find when the student tells that individual who wrote the book this, that man says to the student that who told you this? Who told you to say this question to me? Because I know your capacity. That student would say it is none other than Imam Hassan al-Askari. You see, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam in each era, whether it was Imam Ali, whether it was Imam al-Hassan, whether it was Imam al-Hussein alayhim as-salam, or whether it's Imam Hassan al-Askari, each of them were the protectors of the Quran. And because of the blessings of the Imams, when you look at the history of the Quran, you find that the Shia have a great contribution to ulum al-Quran and the sciences of the development of the Quran. For example, when you look at the major qira'ah and recitation of the Quran in the majority of the world, you find that this narration of the Quran that we have today, the majority of people, it is the narration of a man by the name of Hafs, and he narrates from an individual by the name of Asim. This man, Asim, who was a companion of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, was a Shia and he had inclination to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. That the irony is this, is that those who say that the followers of Ahlul Bayt have not held on to the Quran, you find the irony is this, is that the narration of the Quran that everyone is reciting, whether it is in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else, it is coming from a Shia. So in this manner, you find this is just one example. So when our Imams emphasize the Quran in this manner, Imam Hassan al-Askari, you find it is our responsibility in the way that the early followers of Ahlul Bayt held on to the Quran. You find within this era, the followers of Ahlul Bayt should be those who are holding on to the Quran as well. So we find that at one level, this was one form of doubt which arose in the time of Imam Hassan al-Askari. No, another level of doubt and a discussion which was occurring is that people, they began to have a discussion. Is the Quran eternal or it was created? Imam Hassan al-Askari said that this is the kalam of Allah. The kalam of Allah has its own status. In other words, that your discussion is basically just a polemical discussion that leads to no benefit. So we find that these snippets occur in the life of Imam Hassan al-Askari. And there's one more snippet before I come to the next portion and stage of this discussion, is that it stated one day another major form of doubt which overflowed within that time period is that there was an individual who at that time began to show a karama. A karama, of course, is a type of honor. It is type of a spiritual act that at one level it seems miraculous, but it is by the divine will of God. It stated that in the time of Imam Hassan al-Askari, there was a Christian rabbi, and that Christian rabbi, whenever he would pray, rain would come down. Now imagine that you see a person from another faith, and every time they pray, the rain, it comes down. You can imagine the type of well-knowing that this incident must come to know amongst the people. So you find that Imam Hassan al-Askari, they come to the Imam, they say, this is occurring. The Imam said, go to that man, take what is within his hand and bring it to me. They go to the man, they hold open his hand, they see there was a bone within that hand. Imam Hassan al-Askari said that this bone, it belonged to somebody who was a prophet. And it is because of this blessing you find the rain, it comes down. In this manner, you find Imam Hassan al-Askari, he dispels doubt once again. But now, as I said, the discussion was really about Ghaybatul Sughra and the preparation for Ghaybatul Sughra. You see, the later Abbasid caliphs, they were trying everything to stop this underground system of the Imam. For example, Al-Mutawakkil, one of the later Abbasid caliphs, many of you have heard that he had destroyed the shrine of Imam al-Hussein in Karbala. But one of the reasons that he destroyed this shrine is because one of the centers where the Shia would carry out the activities of the Imam was in Karbala. You see, ziyarah has a social function as well. Ziyarah has a function of organizing, and ziyarah has a function of carrying out the message of the Imam, not just a spiritual function. The spiritual function has its position, but we have seen in history that there is more to just that one component when it comes to many of our actions. So you find this is an example that they were trying to slowly uncover this underground system, and they were trying to come to see what the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam were doing. And in this manner, Imam Hassan al-Askari, twice a week, he would have to report to the Abbasid Caliph of that time. That Abbasid Caliph would check the house of Imam Hassan al-Askari, and in particular, there were many jasus, there were many spies within the house of the Imam. This is why it is stated within the traditions that after Imam Hassan al-Askari, after he marries Narjis Khatun, the mother of Imam Sahib al-Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif, it is stated that the Abbasids would watch, that they knew the traditions, that there would be one more from Ali Muhammad who would uprise. They would watch which of the women within the house is pregnant, which of the women within the house has the potential to give birth so they can kill that next Imam who would come. It is stated that in the way that the pregnancy of the mother of Ibrahim was concealed and the pregnancy of the mother of Musa was concealed, you find the pregnancy of Narjis, the mother of Imam al-Zaman, was concealed. And it's stated one day, Imam Hassan al-Askari, he calls his aunt Hakima. When he calls his aunt Hakima, he says, "Oh, my aunt, on this night that you find that one of my wives will give birth to the final proof of Allah." Lady Hakima says, "I don't know. None of these women are pregnant." Imam Askari says, "No, it will occur on this night." It's stated that Imam Hassan al-Askari, that it is stated that within a room, light begins to flow, and Lady Hakima is a witness to the birth of the 12th Imam. So after the birth of the 12th Imam, you find Imam Hassan al-Askari, number one, as I said, to organize the discussion. Number one, Imam Hassan al-Askari dispelled theological doubts. Number two, Imam Hassan al-Askari, he strengthened the system known as Wikala, or underground deputyship. The third task which Imam Hassan al-Askari carried out for the preparation of the Ghaiba is number one, is that he carried out the act of sending Imam al-Zaman to Medina after the birth of the 12th Imam. Because you find the Abbasids, if there was a child within the house immediately, you find that they would know that there were different individuals who would keep an eye upon the Imam. But after that, you find Imam Hassan al-Askari, his next task was to tell the close confidants who this Imam was. Confidants like Ali al-Mahziyar and a few select individuals. And you find in this manner, after the martyrdom of the Imam, it's stated that the brother of the Imam, Ja'far, he goes to pray over Imam Hassan al-Askari. When he goes to pray over Imam Hassan al-Askari, it's stated Imam al-Zaman, as a child, he comes, he says, "I have a greater right over this body." And you find after that begins the period of the minor occultation. As I said about this period of Al-Ghaibatu Sughra, this period by the historians was called the period of Al-Aheda, or confusion. This was that period where there were many individuals spreading lies and claiming to be the deputies of the Imams. There were many individuals, some, for example, they said that Imam Hassan al-Askari went into Ghaiba. Some, for example, said no, he had another son. Some, for example, they left the Shayo altogether in this time period of Ghaiba. But you find that never is history devoid of guidance. Never is that path of access to the Imam completely cut. But rather the methodology of that access, it changes. You find that within our time period, the hadith of Imam al-Sadiq says that you benefit from the Imam in the way that you benefit from the sun when the cloud is there. So you find in this time period, there were 4 sufara. There were 4 deputies who had direct access to the Imams. The names of these deputies: number 1, you had Uthman bin Sa'id. Number 2, you had his son Muhammad ibn Uthman. Number 3, you had Hussein ibn Roh al-Nawbakhti. And number 4, you had Ali ibn Muhammad. And after him began the period of the major occultation. And many, they may ask that, okay, we have heard in our majalis oftentimes, there were 4 deputies, there were 4 wakala, there were 4, sofara and naibs of the Imams who would have direct access to the Imams. But what did each of them do? What was their goal? You find their goal, number 1, was to strengthen the identity of the Shia and to protect the life of the Imam, amongst other tasks. You see, the first deputy of the Imam, Uthman ibn Sa'id, number 1, he would carry out the task of hiding what the name of the Imam was. It is stated in the early time period, people would not take his name, our 12th Imam's name, by the name of Muhammad, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. because they would hide his identity. And many of the hadith, they would condemn people to do so for this reason. So they would have different titles for the Imam. For example, they would call the Imam Nahiyatul Muqaddasa. Then, you've heard the Ziyaratul Nahiya of the 12th Imam. Why is it called the Ziyara of Nahiya? One of the reasons, Nahiya, which means a side or a valley of a sort, you find that one of the titles of the Imam, because they couldn't say his name, was Nahiya. So you find that the first deputy of the Imam, he would hide the identity of the Imam, he would hide the identity of the followers of the Imam, and in this way, he would strengthen the system of Wikala. But at the second time, him and the rest of these three deputies, you find they carried out an important task. And that important task was to establish belief within the 12th of Ali Muhammad. You see, we have both textual and rational evidence that the world cannot be devoid of a hujjah and a divine guide. And a key aspect of our spirituality and our movement to God is for us to internalize this fact. Oftentimes, when it comes to our tenets of faith, we know them in our mind. But as the Urafa would say, the journey from the mind to the heart is a lifelong journey. The goal is that which is in our mind to settle within our heart. And when the tenet of faith, that our Imam is with us, that our Imam, the divine guide of Allah, the Hujjah of Allah, his return is upon us, you find that this will have an impact, a profound impact within the life of a human being. And these were many of the snippets from the life of Imam Hassan al-Askari and his preparation for that time period known as Al-Aheda. But you see, these nights of Rabi'ul Awwal in many ways are nights of great musibah. That on one end, tonight we give our condolences to the Imam of our time. That tonight our Imam, he mourns the martyrdom of his father. That our Imam, he would come, he would recite the Salatul Janaza of Imam Hassan al-Askari after Imam al-Askari was poisoned. But there is one more masayib upon this night. It is stated that the beginning of the days of Rabi'ul Awwal are those days where the house of Fatimatul Zahra alayha salam was attacked. It's stated these are those days that Janab Zahra would go to the grave of her father Rasulullah, and she would recite those lines, Subbat alayya masa'ibun lo annaha subbat ala al-ayyami sirna layaliha. She would say, that musibah, it befell me, that if that musibah, it fell upon the brightest of days, they would turn into the darkest of nights. That what is the musibah of Janab Zahra, that musibah which each of the Imams would remember, from Amir al-Mu'mineen to Imam Hassan al-Askari. It's stated that a point it comes after the death of the Prophet, they surround the house of Fatimatul Zahra. They say that if you don't come out at this moment, we'll push the door down. You know what Janab Zahra says? She says, do you not know that this is the house that Rasulullah would visit? It's stated after the revelation of Ayatul Tathir, for 6 months, Rasulullah, on the way to the mosque for Salatul Fajr, he would go to the house of Fatima. He would say, Assalamu alayka ya ahla bayt al-nabuwa wa ma'din al-risala. You find now they've come to that house. She says, do you not know that this is the house where Hassan and Hussein were within that house? They say, so what? A point it comes, they burn the door to the house of Janab Zahra. Zahra. It stated that they pushed the door onto Fatima Zahra. In between the door and the wall was Zahra. She would say, Ilayya ya Fidda. She would say, oh Fidda, come towards me at this moment. You know, after the door was pushed upon Janab Zahra, it stated that the rib of Fatima was broken. You know, Ayatollah Wahid Khurasani would say that imagine you have a broken finger. Janab Zahra for 95 days had a broken rib. Can you handle a broken finger for 95 days? But I say, oh Wahid Khurasani, oh great scholar, but there is one difference between the finger and the rib. A finger is that bone. When you stabilize it, the pain, it begins to go away. But a rib is that bone. When the rib, it breaks, every time a person, they breathe, they feel pain at that moment. It stated a point it comes that Janab Zahra, she says to Ayman, I am going towards my room and I will recite the Quran. She says, oh Ayman, when my children Hassan and Hussein return, give food towards Hassan and Hussein. And when you hear the recitation of the Quran stop, know that Fatima is no more. Janab Zahra, she goes towards the room. She begins to recite the Quran. A point it comes, the recitation of the Quran, it stops. Ayman says, Assalamu alayki ya bint Rasulillah. Assalamu alayki ya Fatima al-Zahra. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawm al-dhalimin. Ya Allah, we ask through the right of Imam Hassan al-Askari, we ask through the right of his grandmother Janab Zahra, that wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam are in difficulty, help them. Wherever they are sick and ailing, cure them. Ya Allah, there are many individuals who have requested for dua throughout various communities. Some of them are ill with COVID, some of them have other physical ailments. Ya Allah, through the right of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, cure them. We pray for the intercession of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We pray for the strength to benefit and to practice upon the teachings of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. And we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, the son of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم.
ماتم حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا آدان ٹکڑے شیخ کا جگر کر دیا سارا پامال ہوا باغ رسول انام کا ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا جب زہر کے صدمے سے تڑپنے لگے سرور جب زہر کے صدمے سے تڑپنے لگے سرور نظروں میں تھا وہ واقعہ تصویر حسن کا ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا، عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، زہرا پچاری کھاتی ہے پوتے کی لاش پر، زہرا پچاری کھاتی ہے پوتے کی لاش پر، ہے حال غیب دیکھ اہل آسمان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا، عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، رونے سے حشر ہو گیا سب جن و بشر میں، رونے سے حشر ہو گیا سب جن و بشر میں، تابوت اٹھا جب کہ شہید و جہان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا، عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، یا رب تیری جناب میں غم کی ہے دعا، یا رب تیری جناب میں سب کی ہے یہ دعا، دامن نہ چھوٹے ہاتھ سے شاہ زمان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا، عریان سر ہے آج امام زمان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، ماتم ہے آج عسکری شاہ ذیشان کا، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، وہ عابد بیمار تھا، وہ عابد بیمار تھا، چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا، چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا، اور شام کا بازار تھا، اور مصطفیٰ کی بیٹیا، مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین، مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین، مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، شبیر کی اولاد لی، شبیر کی اولاد لی، سینے پہ جوشا کے پلی، سینے پہ جوشا کے پلی، جس کی ابا رن میں جلی، منہ پہ تماچوں کے نشان، مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین، حسین یا حسین یا حسین، آخر کا وقت کہنا میرا یہ کلام ہے، سب عاشق حسین کو میرا سلام ہے، رکشیوں کو آباد سدا اپنے کرم سے، کرتا زیداروں کو رہا رنج و وبا سے، دنیا میں سب کو کربلا جانا نصیب ہو، ہم جا کے کرے ماتم عباس علمدار، حل کیجئے مشکل میری اب دیر ستم ہے، عباس علی تم کو سکینہ کی قسم ہے، الفاتحہ۔ إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد، متوجه زيارة. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك، عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبكى الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا غريب الغرباء السلطان أبو الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا أختك فاطمة المعصومة ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان الأمان الأمان. أحسن الله لك العزاء في أبيك الغريب الشهيد المظلوم إمام الحسن العسكري عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وزهور الأمن ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.